You think two incomes mean twice the wealth. But what if I told you they've created twice the vulnerability? The greatest economic paradox of the late 20th century wasn't that families earn more. It's that earning more made them broker, more fragile, more trapped than ever before. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the mechanisms of this economic trap that I witnessed unfold across American households from the 1970s through the early 2000s. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll discover how to break free from the invisible chains that bind dual-income families to perpetual financial fragility. So, before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because understanding this trap is the first step toward reclaiming the economic freedom that your parents' generation took for granted. Here's what actually happened when America doubled its workforce. Let me paint you a picture from my own observations throughout the 1970s and beyond. A picture that will make your blood run cold when you realize what we've done to ourselves. I watched as American families, with the best intentions in the world, marched straight into an economic bear trap disguised as opportunity. And the most frustrating part, they were told it was progress. In 1970, I could point to any middle-class neighborhood in America and show you something remarkable. One breadwinner, usually the father, earning perhaps $9,000 to $12,000 annually, could support an entire family, not just barely scraping by, mind you, but actually building wealth. They'd buy a home for roughly $23,000, about 2.5 times their annual income. They'd spend maybe 20 to 25% of their earnings on housing. They'd put their kids through decent public schools without bankrupting themselves. They'd have a car, take modest vacations, and here's the kicker. They'd save money, real savings, not the pathetic fraction of income that modern families desperately try to squirrel away between paychecks. Now, you might be thinking, but Milton, women entering the workforce was about equality, about opportunity, about choice. And you're absolutely right. I've always been a fierce advocate for free choice and open markets. If a woman wants to work, if a family chooses a dual income arrangement, that's their right. But here's where the free market failed to protect individual choice. Because what started as an option became an economic necessity, and that transformation destroyed the very freedom it promised to create. Let me show you the mathematics of destruction. When women's workforce participation jumped from 43% in 1970 to over 57% by the 1990s, something extraordinary happened to household purchasing power. Suddenly, families had two incomes to bid on the same pool of houses, the same neighborhoods, the same schools. Basic economics tells us what happens when demand doubles while supply remains relatively constant. Prices explode, and explode they did. By 2000, just before my death in 2006, I watched median home prices climb to over 6 times median household income, even though households now had 2 earners instead of 1. The bidding war effect, this is what I call the great wealth illusion of the late 20th century. Families looked at their combined incomes and thought, we're making $75,000 together. We can afford so much more than our parents. And the banks agreed. Oh, how the banks agreed. They looked at those 2 incomes and said, yes, you qualify for this $350,000 mortgage. What the banks didn't tell them, what nobody told them, was that they were qualifying for a financial prison sentence where both incomes would be required, not for building wealth, not for security, but simply to maintain the monthly payments. Here's the evidence from my own research and observations during this period. In 1970, a single-income family could build genuine economic security because their fixed costs consumed perhaps 50 to 60% of their income. The remaining 40 to 50%, that was flexibility. That was savings. That was their buffer against economic shocks. But by 1995, dual-income families were spending 75 to 80% or more of their combined income on fixed costs: housing, healthcare, transportation, childcare. The second income didn't create surplus. It got immediately absorbed by expanded fixed obligations. And here's where it gets truly painful. Every dollar of that second income came with massive hidden costs that nobody calculated. Taxes. because of progressive taxation, that second income hit the higher brackets. A $40,000 second income might only net $26,000 after federal, state, and payroll taxes. Then came child care because now both parents were working. In the 1980s and 1990s, quality child care cost $8,000 to $15,000 per child annually. Got 2 kids? There goes most of that second income right there. Add transportation costs for the second worker, another $3,000 to $5,000 annually. The exhaustion expenses, takeout food, convenience services, all the things you pay for because nobody has time or energy anymore. The net value of that second income, sometimes less than $5,000 annually, sometimes negative. The economic trap that destroyed financial resilience. Now, we arrive at the heart of darkness, the core mechanism that transformed American families from economically resilient units into fragile house of cards arrangements, one unexpected expense away from collapse. And this, my friends, is where my training as an economist makes me absolutely furious at what we allowed to happen. You want to know the real difference between your grandparents' economic situation and yours? It's not income. It's not standard of living. It's margin. It's resilience. It's the buffer between surviving and thriving. Your grandparents with their single income had something that modern dual income families sacrificed on the altar of material consumption. They had a backup plan. Think about it. When your grandfather was the sole earner in 1970, what happened if he lost his job? It was serious, yes, but the family had options. Your grandmother, who had been managing the household, could enter the workforce. Not ideal, but possible. That potential second income was an insurance policy sitting in reserve, ready to be activated in emergencies. The family had already structured their life around one income, so that second income, if it became necessary, represented pure additional resources to weather the storm. But what did we do? We took that emergency reserve, that insurance policy, and we activated it as the default. We deployed our backup plan just to afford baseline middle-class existence. It's like a pilot using the emergency landing gear for every single flight. Works great until you actually have an emergency, and then you discover you've got nothing left. Let me share data that should terrify every dual-income family in America. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, I observed bankruptcy rates climbing even as household incomes rose. By the late 1990s, families with 2 incomes were actually more likely to file bankruptcy than single-income families had been in 1970. More income, more bankruptcy. How is that possible? Because they had engineered out all their flexibility. They had consumed their margin. Here's the mechanism. Pay attention, because this explains why you feel broker making $100,000 than your parents felt making $40,000. Every major financial decision you make, your mortgage, your cars, your children's activities, your lifestyle, gets calibrated to require both incomes. The bank qualifies you based on combined income. You buy the house that needs $8,000 monthly from 2 paychecks. You commit to expenses that are only sustainable with 2 full-time workers continuously employed. Now answer me this and be honest with yourself. What happens if either income disappears? One person gets laid off, someone gets sick, a parent needs care, a child has special needs requiring one-parent home? The answer is catastrophic financial failure. Not because you were irresponsible, not because you spent foolishly, but because you built a financial structure with zero redundancy, zero margin, zero flexibility. I witnessed this pattern repeat across thousands of families. Engineers making $65,000, marketers making $55,000, combined household income $120,000, top 25% of American earners. They should have been building dynastic wealth. Instead, they were stressed, anxious, one transmission repair away from credit card debt. Why? Because that $120,000 came with $115,000 in fixed monthly obligations. They had $5,000 of annual flexibility in an economy that throws $10,000 curveballs at you regularly. And here's the cruelest part of this trap, the psychological component that keeps people in prison even when they sense something's wrong. Because you see that big combined number on your tax return, You feel like you should be wealthy. You make spending decisions based on that gross income. You compare yourself to your parents who made $50,000 combined in 1985. And you think, we make $130,000. We should be so much better off. But you're not. You're worse off. Because your parents' $50,000 came with $30,000 in fixed costs and $20,000 in flexibility. Your $130,000 comes with $125,000 in fixed costs and maybe $5,000 in actual breathing room. The data from the 1990s showed this pattern clearly. Two-income families were saving less than single-income families had saved in previous decades, despite higher absolute incomes. They were carrying more debt. They were more vulnerable to economic shocks. They had less capacity to weather job loss, medical emergencies, or any significant disruption. This is what I call the fixed cost expansion trap, a phenomenon where every additional dollar of income immediately gets claimed by expanded fixed obligations. You get a raise? Great. Your mortgage, your car payments, your lifestyle expenses expand too. Absorb it. Your spouse starts working? Wonderful. Housing prices, childcare costs, and lifestyle inflation consume every penny. You're running faster on the treadmill, but the treadmill speed increases exactly in proportion to your effort. How to break free and build real economic security. Now, here's where we transform understanding into action. Because knowledge without application is just entertainment, and I didn't spend decades studying economics to entertain you. I came here to liberate you. What I'm about to share isn't just theory. This is the battle-tested strategy that the families who thrived during my lifetime used to escape the two-income trap while their neighbors drowned in it. Listen carefully. The solution isn't to go back to single-income households, though for some families that might be optimal. The solution is to structure your financial life around what I call the one-income foundation principle. Here's what that means. Your fixed costs, mortgage, insurance, utilities, basic transportation, basic food, must be coverable by one income alone. Not comfortably, not luxuriously, but coverable. Everything else, the second income, gets treated as temporary, discretionary, and deployable for wealth building. This requires a complete psychological revolution in how you think about that second paycheck. Most families do the opposite. They see two incomes as permanent and guaranteed, so they build fixed costs that require both. They buy the $400,000 house that needs $8,500 monthly. They lease two nice cars for $900 combined. They live in the expensive school district that demands a premium, and then they wonder why they feel trapped. Here's the counterintuitive approach. And this is where you need courage because it goes against every social pressure you face. If you make $75,000 and your spouse makes $55,000, you structure your life around $60,000 maximum. You buy the $200,000 house, not the $400,000 house you qualify for. You drive paid-off cars instead of leases. You live in a neighborhood that's good but not elite. Your kids go to public schools that are solid but not nationally ranked. But Milton, I hear you protesting. That sounds like deprivation. That sounds like we're not using our full earning potential. Wrong. You're absolutely using your full potential. You're just directing it toward building actual wealth instead of servicing expanded consumption. That second income, or at least 70 to 80% of it, goes directly into systematic wealth. Accumulation, emergency fund first until you have 6 months of those reduced fixed costs saved. Then maximum retirement contributions. Then taxable investment accounts. Then real estate investments if appropriate. Here's what happens, and I saw this pattern in every family that successfully implemented this strategy. Within 5 to 7 years, something miraculous occurs. The investments you made with that systematically saved second income start generating their own returns. Compounding takes over. And suddenly you have what you thought two incomes would give you initially. Genuine financial security. Not the fake security of we make good money, but real security of we have assets that could support us even if our income disappeared. Let me make this concrete with real numbers from families I advised during the 1980s and 1990s. Family A and Family B both had combined incomes of $85,000. Family A bought the $280,000 house their dual income qualified for. Family B bought a $140,000 house that one income could handle. 10 years later, Family A had maybe $40,000 in home equity and minimal other savings. Family B had $80,000 in home equity plus $250,000 in invested assets because they'd been systematically investing $30,000 annually from that second income. Which family was actually wealthier? Which family could survive a job loss? Which family had options when opportunity knocked or crisis arrived? Family B had transformed temporary high income into permanent financial security. Family A had transformed high income into high fixed costs and ongoing dependency. Now, let's address the practical barriers. Because I know some of you are thinking, this is great theory, Milton, but we already have the big mortgage. We're already locked into the expensive lifestyle. What do we do now? First, acknowledge where you are without judgment. The trap was built by broader economic forces, not personal failure. Second, start engineering margin immediately, even if it's just $500 monthly initially. Cut discretionary spending ruthlessly. No vacations, no restaurants, no entertainment beyond basics until you've built a 3-month emergency fund. Third, develop an exit strategy from your fixed costs. Can you refinance to a lower rate? Can you sell the expensive house and buy something more modest? Yes, transaction costs hurt, but staying trapped hurts more. Can you sell one of those car leases and buy a reliable used vehicle? Can you move to a lower cost of living area where one income could cover basics? These aren't easy decisions, but they're liberation decisions. And here's the psychological framework that makes this possible. You need to redefine what success means. Success isn't the impressive house or the luxury cars. Success is freedom. Success is options. Success is waking up knowing that if anything happens to either income, your family will survive and even thrive. Success is being able to make career decisions based on fulfillment rather than mortgage payments. Success is your kids seeing parents who are present and unstressed rather than exhausted and anxious. I want to close with this truth, a truth I learned from decades of studying economic behavior and human nature. The families who achieve genuine lasting prosperity aren't the ones who maximize their consumption in proportion to their income. They're the ones who maximize the gap between income and fixed costs, and they deploy that gap toward building assets that eventually make income optional rather than essential. You're standing at a crossroads right now. One path leads to continuing the pattern, working harder, earning more, spending more, feeling broker despite higher numbers. The other path requires short-term sacrifice, but leads to genuine economic security within a decade. It requires you to live below your earning potential today so you can live on your own terms tomorrow. The two-income trap isn't inevitable. It's a choice, often an unconscious choice shaped by social pressure and inadequate understanding of economic forces. But now you understand the mechanism. You see the trap clearly. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? I spent my career fighting for economic freedom and individual liberty. The greatest liberty isn't freedom from government interference, though that matters. The greatest liberty is freedom from economic desperation, the freedom to make choices based on values rather than survival. That freedom is within your reach, but you have to be willing to swim against the current, to disappoint the Joneses, to build differently than everyone around you. Start today, not tomorrow, not next month, today. Calculate your true one-income number. Look at your fixed costs with brutal honesty. Make a plan to systematically invest that second income rather than spend it. Every dollar you save today is buying back your freedom tomorrow. The trap only holds you if you don't know you're in it. Now you know. Now you can escape. Now. You can build the economic security that dual incomes promised, but failed to deliver. Your financial liberation starts with understanding, continues with courage, and succeeds through consistent action. Go build the life of margin, of flexibility, of genuine security that you deserve. And remember, earning more money never made anyone wealthy. building assets, controlling costs, and preserving flexibility. That's the formula that's worked for every successful family I've studied across 7 decades of economic observation. Now go, take action, and break free from the two-income trap that's held you captive long enough. Your future self will thank you for the courage you showed today.